The award-winning National Security Board Security Investigative Reporter for TV, radio, and the print media. And Kimberly, by the way, is the Senior Foreign Policy Advisor for the Committee for Responsible Foreign Policy. She's News, C26 News in San Diego, as well as One American News Network. Her website is thetvreport.com. Hey, Kimberly, how are you?
I'm fine. How about yourself, Chuck?
Pretty good, pretty good. Couple of things we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
Flores' rule on the DHS, and when we get to that part, also I'll throw in the fact about Obama wanting to get rid of automatic citizenship. All right?
Yep.
And first off, we're going to talk about GITMO and thousands of ISIS terrorists that the United States has in custody.
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of a word you don't hear thrown around too much anymore. GITMO, GITMO.
No. Well, this is actually good news, and I think finally the president's getting some decent advice about Guantanamo Bay. Of course, you know, I've been down there and covered the hearings. We did live feeds on your show here as well, and you know, it's a big expense. It's, you know, the U.S. federal courts have a much better track record of putting terrorists away once they bring them back to the United States. So I think the president's finally got the idea that this is costing the U.S. taxpayers far more than what we're getting out of it. And plus it's kind of, you know, with the relationship with Cuba and some of those other countries, it doesn't necessarily benefit us.
Yeah, in fact, you say that, Trump said we're going to tell them we've already told them to take these prisoners that they've captured because the United States is not going to put them in Guantanamo for the next 50 years and pay for it.
Exactly.
And I wonder how in the world with the left, how are they going to attack him on this? Because, you know, they want it closed.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, we got to close that. That was one of Obama's top priorities, which never happened.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd like to see it closed. I think the majority of the American population and taxpayers would like to see it closed. Again, all of these people, I mean, and we basically have a handful of the planners of the 9/11 attack on the United States, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, you know, being the ringleader here. You know, he's sitting down there. He's already confessed to have done this. He's also the person who cut off Danny Pearl's head. It was a Wall Street Journal reporter that was killed in Pakistan. So this is a very evil guy. And being in a courtroom with him, he's evil. There is just no way around it. He's an evil person. But he actually has a pretty good life down there in Guantanamo Bay. The weather is good. It's got beachfront to look out to, and they've got soccer fields. And if he was in the U.S., he'd probably be at Supermax with Guzman and some of the other, you know, terrorists that this country's had. And the conditions aren't as nice as they are down there. So again, this is just kind of, I think, comes down to the legal system was against this. Basically, from the get-go, the Bush administration had Alberto Gonzales, the Attorney General at the time, kind of write up some legislation, some rule tinkering that it was okay for us to keep these people in GITMO because it wasn't U.S. soil. Yeah, kind of is on, you know, U.S. you know, laws affect that area. So that was a very welcome surprise. We didn't hear any of this in the mainstream media. They didn't want to talk about this. And I think the other issue that most Americans didn't know is that the U.S. has more than 2,000 ISIS terrorists currently in custody. That's a lot of terrorists that we're taking care of.
I was not aware of that until I read your report.
Yeah.
It's kind of refreshing, but then again, it's like, wow, you know, there's got to be a lot of people guarding them, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're all in custody overseas. They're not here at the U.S., but...
Yeah, that's what I mean, but
yeah.
Is it our Army?
Yes.
Over there,
yes. No, this is our military. We have them in military prisons. So right now the president is watching, you know, the EU basically trample all over, you know, the US while we're being the policemen of the world, and they're still not getting their percentage of the, you know, NATO. They're not paying for their defense of their country. And the president has said that, you know, all these countries have promised this in the last 2.5 years, and none of them have really come up with the money. A handful of them have, but he said, look, this is what we're going to do. We're getting out of the business and we're getting out of the Middle East. And we've got these prisoners, and unless the EU starts stepping up and taking more responsibility of this, he's going to send those ISIS terrorists back to their home countries, which are the UK, Italy, France, Germany, Turkey. He's going to send them back to their home countries and let these countries deal with the terrorists how they will. Caveat here that the president didn't talk about, but I would like to mention, is that the ISIS does not fall under any kind of the Geneva Rule Conventions, because they are fighting a dirty war. They're ramshackle. They don't represent a country or anything of that nature. While they say they're a caliphate, they don't represent a country. So they don't have due process like they would under the Geneva Convention. So essentially, the U.S. or whomever is holding these individuals could have them go through a speedy trial situation, and these terrorists would then most likely be found guilty, and then they would be executed on the battlefield in the Middle East. So that's another option. It's not very pleasant to talk about, but that is an option that the U.S. does have. But the president wants to really put some leverage on the EU to really come up and say, look, if you guys want your country protected, you've got to start coming up and either paying the money or sending your troops down there to fight terrorists wherever it may be.
Similar to his United Nations speech.
Yeah.
Get in or get out.
Yeah, and
so,
this.
You mentioned the word the Geneva Convention. You don't hear that thrown around too much anymore, do you?
No, because if you were to look at conventional warfare today, we're not really battling conventional warfare. I mean, we could say that there's economic warfare. We can say that there's countries that are trying to meddle in our elections, namely China right now. The president's been on the warpath today over China, standing up and saying we're going to lob $75 billion worth of tariffs to industries that are in red states. So that's directly going after the president of the United States. And this is something Russia never, ever rose to this level. And right now, China is lobbying economic warfare on the president of the United States. And by doing so, it's going, the president has said, this businesses, you got to start getting out of there. We don't need China. We don't. And when you look at the $21 trillion economy each year that the U.S. has, China needs us more than we need them. Will people be hurt and will the economy slow if businesses leave China and come back to the United States? Probably for the short term, but in the end, America, we've talked about this, Chuck, we need to get back to being manufacturing. We need to be the exporters of our own agriculture industry and be able to feed our people and build our infrastructure instead of bowing to these other nations across the world that just want the U.S. to police the world and take cheap products to throw them into the U.S. marketplace. This has got to stop. Trump came to a head with China today, and I think we're going to see some short-term economic pain out of this. But long-term, China cannot outwit the United States on this front. They need us more than we need them.
And I know the tariff is going to happen in two waves. September 1st will be the first start.
Yeah.
And then December 15th. And I'm kind of curious, it says China is going to move forward with plans to impose tariffs on U.S. vehicles and auto parts. And I'm thinking, I don't know, I don't think they build that great of cars. I'm not sure though.
Yeah,
maybe they're good in.
Yeah, I have never driven a Chinese car, so I couldn't tell you what a Chinese car drives. No, they do flood the zone with cheap products. Why do you think every family or many families in this country have multiple big screen TVs in their homes? Because Chinese have driven the prices down to such a low level that people could afford more than one TV in this country. So do we really need more than one TV in this country in the short term? The answer is probably no. But Americans are used to a being able to go to Walmart and buy their products cheap, and China, in effect, is driving those prices down. But the return for this country and the return on investment is just not going to be there, and we're looking at our deficit and our debt just explode right now. If all that money was staying in the U.S., that debt and that deficit would definitely come down. But again, it's going to come at a cost for some economic short-term pain, because by and large, the U.S. has the best, most vibrant economy, and still the money is all coming to this country for safe haven. So again, it may look bad on MSNBC when they're trying to say the country's in recession, but in reality, it will work itself out, and we got to keep $75 billion from Chinese tariff on the U.S. when we have more than $21 trillion a year. You're looking at way less than 0.25% in the U.S. economy. So there will be some pain, but it's very, very little, and most average Americans aren't even going to see that. It's not even a blip for them.
Yeah, I always found it sort of humorous when they were talking about when he first put the tariffs out. Well, we're not going to be able to get fireworks, and nobody makes firecrackers better than the Chinese. So, and they actually say, they said, well, when could the United States catch up with them? And experts were saying never. As good as they are at fireworks.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
it's important. We like the 4th of July. I like fireworks too. But but America doesn't make as good as fireworks. Well, why don't we have some investment in these big hedge fund people? Why don't they go out and let's see them put a challenge to these young people in America, the millennials and the Gen Zers, say, hey, let's come up with better fireworks than China. Just a thought.
If you're looking for a new entrepreneurship, there you go. I want to move on to a little bit of immigration news here.
Yeah.
I think, I know what you had on your latest report, but since then, Trump says now he's thinking about issuing an executive order that will prevent children born on American soil to illegal immigrants from gaining automatic American citizenship.
Yep.
Boy, they always took whatever it was, the 14th Amendment or something.
Yeah.
And the progressives, the lefties, translated it to being, come on over here, you're an automatic citizen, after you're born.
Yeah, I mean, and this is another issue that people who live in states where there's a high rate of homelessness, like California, New York, Washington D.C. You go to the district here, and you're actually there. I mean, there are literally tent cities around the district, and these people are living on the sidewalks, and it's no longer illegal for them to pitch tents and actually live in these places. It's coming at a cost. People, typhus is a disease that this country hasn't had for a century or so. And right now in Los Angeles, they have a typhus epidemic going on because they have so many homeless people. People can't afford to live in this country any longer. And when you look at the birthright citizenship, a great deal of them, especially from China, because they come over and they fly and stay for a couple weeks, have their babies, and then their kids are American citizens. And then, from Latin America as well, they're coming up, they're having their kids. And then through the welfare system, at least with the Latin Americans, we're covering the housing costs, the food costs, medical treatment, because the parents are obviously the caregivers and they can't work, they don't know the language, so they're very expensive for the U.S. taxpayers. And as a result, housing has completely gone up in these very, very navy blue states. People can't even afford to live in homes or apartments anymore. So they've literally run into a shortage because these governors of these states have opened their arms up and said, please come to us. We will take care of you. The taxpayers out in California are starting to get it. Yeah, they're getting it.
Look at Sanctuary State, California. Come on in here. We're going to give you free health care, blah, blah, blah. Free. Oh, and by the way, we got 150,000 homeless. And now, besides the human waste, all right, the biggest problem now, I'm looking at this morning, I guess, the rat infestation.
Yeah, so, when you look at the great state of California, what used to be the golden state of California, this is the side effects, or this is what happens. These are the consequences that the state is now facing because they have welcomed illegal people into the country to live in their state. The infrastructure is horrible, as you know. I mean, there's no money going to fix freeways and roads and things like that. And, it's getting to that breaking point where I think I've always stated, when the trash doesn't get picked up in front of the curb, in front of your house, that's when you start getting really upset because it gets smelly and it's not a very pleasant sight. So I think right now in California, literally that is finally happening, and Californians are looking at it and they're infuriated with what Governor Newsom continues to do and open his arms to people who aren't even lawfully present, shouldn't be in this country to begin with.
Yep, and now he's telling police officers you can't use your gun.
Yeah, I mean,
to save your life. So running there, you don't have to worry about it. It's
Yeah.
sort of like, especially on a high-speed chase.
yeah,
I mean, you don't know if they have guns or not. But
You don't.
It's always trying to hand behind the top.
yeah. And criminals are taking note. Criminals know this, so they know that they can actually go out and commit more crime
Yeah.
because they're not going to be, the cops aren't going to shoot them. So what's
Keep
going
on
to,
running,
yeah,
Yeah.
very sad.
Hey, Kimberly, coming up on the break here, and when we come back, I want to touch on the fact that a lot of people don't realize that the automatic birth citizenship, it's not one for the baby. No, it's for the mother and probably the father that came along. And all right, Kimberly Dvorak, streaming live on Facebook, periscope.com, CRN Chuck Wilder with Kimberly Dvorak. And streaming live, periscope.com, Facebook a little bit later on. This report will be on YouTube. And very interesting stuff here. Yes. So, as I said before the break, Kimberly, a lot of people don't realize, so you have a little baby, yes, make it a citizen. It was born in America. Yeah, well, who brought it and who was that person with? And, and it goes on and on and on. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, President Trump is looking again to shake things up along the border because the congressmen in both parties have decided they're not really going to tackle this issue at all. What better way to spur a debate in this country, at least between the elites and the mainstream media, than to say that you're going to do two things. You're going to do an executive order to end birthright citizenship. And then the second thing, that you are going to make a few rule changes within the Flores agreement. You're just going to kind of tweak that document a bit. You're going to, keep the family units together, as, all the liberals, scream that we have to, even though we don't even know if these children are actually with their parents or just with people that paid for them to cross the border. Then they're going to keep them in custody longer. They're just not going to do the catch and release.
Have you noticed on mainstream media how I couldn't believe it? I saw like 3 different mainstream newspaper reports and television. Trump has decided to hold the children longer.
Yeah.
It wasn't, the immigrants longer.
Yeah.
The children.
Yeah.
For the children, unless it comes to abortion, then we don't want to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, and this is just another, it's a red meat topic for the left, for sure. They believe in open borders. But again, they don't want to live in the communities where all of these people are currently residing or living in tents. That's not allowed in their communities. And again, they're not really wanting to do anything because right now with immigration, it's a situation where the president right now is just enforcing laws that are on the books. So if the mainstream media, the left, and some of the rhinos on the right want to actually do something to fix the problem, they need to get back to work, roll up their sleeves, and pass legislation. That's where immigration falls. Forcing presidents. Obama did the same thing with DACA. So, this kind of, this tit for tat, like, okay, well, he did that, so I'm going to end birthright citizenship. I think the country as a whole, if you look at the other countries that have it, there's roughly 25 countries around the world that have birthright citizenship. One of them being Venezuela, Cuba, the socialist paradise, Brazil. What we see what's going on in Brazil. This is the effects of birthright citizenship. These people don't even necessarily want to be Americans or whatever countries that they decide they're going to have their children in. They don't necessarily anymore want to be Americans. They want to bring their own flags from these countries in the Central America and in Latin America, in some cases Africa. They want those flags flying. So if they were here really for that better life, they would learn English. They would actually, sit down, figure out how they can get right with the law, and then they would become prosperous people in our society, people that we welcome under our legal and lawful immigration that accepts 1.5 million new people every year.
More than all the other countries combined
Yeah.
when it comes to
Yep.
allowing people to come into your country.
Yep.
Well, I'll tell you, another excellent report
Thank
from
you.
Kimberly before that. And won't be too long, you'll be able to pick this up on YouTube also. And you're doing a great job. Don't forget she is the Senior Foreign Policy Advisor for the Committee for Responsible Foreign Policy. So we go from everywhere, from A to Z. Hey, thank you very much, and look forward to our next report.
Thank you.